Hi everybody. I want to take just a couple minutes to talk about our first real assignment, the journal that we are doing this week. Now in MindEdge, if we click on the drop-down menu and go to 1-6 Journal from Problem to Persuasion, it's going to take us to a little bit of information about this assignment. Now remember, some of our assignments will be submitted in MindEdge and some will be submitted in Brightspace itself. So what are we trying to do in this journal? What we want to do is read through all of the content in MindEdge and all of our supplemental material and the announcements. And then we want to select two possible problems within our field that have two very clear possible arguments. Because remember, with persuasion, we're trying to persuade somebody to see our perspective. So in a journal, what we want to do is write a fully developed paragraph for each problem. So we're going to have two paragraphs, one for each problem. And they need to be 5 to 8 sentences each. Remember, 5 is the minimum, so let's try and have 5 sentences. But feel free to write a little bit more per paragraph if you like. What we want to do is think about problems in our field of study or our career field that are clearly debatable. For example, I am in English, so maybe one of the problems that I will explore is the use of text lingo, of chat lingo in students' papers. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? So you want to think and brainstorm about problems in your field and then explain two. There's my fan, I'm sorry, it's loud. Choose two, write a paragraph on each, and what are we talking about in these paragraphs? First, we want to explain how it is argumentative. What are the two sides to both of those issues that you will be explaining? We also want to think about how we plan to approach it in our project, and that's just a fancy way of saying what side of the argument are you going to take. In my case, am I going to argue that using text lingo in papers is acceptable, or am I going to argue that it is not acceptable? And then we also want to talk about why we're personally interested. So we're going to have two paragraphs to start this journal, one talking about problem A, one talking about problem B. And in each of those paragraphs, we are going to say, hey, this is the problem, these are the two sides, this is the stance that I am going to argue, and this is why I'm interested in it. Then after exploring the so-called argumentativeness of your problems, you want to take a minute to kind of think about it. And then write an additional 1 to 2 paragraphs to reflect on the importance of persuading your audience that you are most likely to write about. So in my journal, I've got these 2 paragraphs talking about 2 potential problems, and then a 3rd paragraph explaining which one I want to argue about and why it is important. We also want to consider who our audience is. Now, the challenging thing about audience is when we're writing a paper for class, we typically say, hey, our instructor, our professor is the audience. And that's true to a point. I will be reading your paper, but I am not strictly your audience. Who else out there in the big wide world would benefit from reading your argument about this? In my example, where I'm talking about text lingo in a paper, perhaps it would be other English students or perhaps even other professors of English. Who else besides me and your classmates would have value of reading your paper? Okay, so we're going to have essentially 3 to 4 paragraphs. In our first paragraph, we're going to write 5 to 8 sentences explaining 2 sides of one problem, your approach, what are you going to be arguing, and why you're interested in the topic. And we're going to do that for our first 2 paragraphs for our first 2 problems. And then we're going to have an additional 3rd or maybe 4th, if you want to get a little bit wordy, paragraph where we're explaining the importance of the topic that we're choosing and who our audience is and why it is important to talk to them. Okay, so if you have any questions on this, let me know. I'll be happy to clarify. Let's just take a quick look at our rubric. Remember that we do post a rubric for everything. And it always starts out with a summary of what we just talked about, of what we're actually doing in our paper. And then it has very clearly broken down critical elements. And these are the things that we're actually going to get graded on. And you'll notice that we have a couple different elements down the side, and then across the top we have our skill level. Exemplary, proficient, needs improvement, or not evident. We typically want to strive for proficient or exemplary. So, very easy breakdown for this assignment. Do you talk about potential problem number 1? Do you identify what that problem is? And does it have 2 clear sides that you talk about? And do you explain why you're interested in it or how it's related to your career? And that's what we do for potential problem 1 and potential problem 2. And then, do you discuss the importance of persuasion? Why is it important to talk to your audience about this? Do you tell us who your audience is? And then we have this last one on all of our assignments. It's called Articulation of Response. And what this is how is your writing? Are you using good grammar? Is it organized? If we're required to use citations, are your citations correct? And that sort of thing. So that's kind of a breakdown of our rubric. Now you'll notice that there is no way to actually submit this in MindEdge. So we actually want to go over to Blackboard to our assignments, click the course menu, drop down, and then click Assignments, and then click on 1-6, our journal, and then this will take us to that submission page. It'll give you a breakdown of what the assignment is, and it'll give you that rubric once more. We try to make it as transparent as possible of what we are expected to do. And then right here, you can add your file, and I will be able to access it. And then always make sure to hit the submit button right down here on the bottom in blue, and that will actually submit it to Brightspace, and then I will be able to grade it and give feedback to you. So that's a little bit of a rundown of what we're doing with our journal. I will try to do these little short videos, short videos for all of our assignments. But if you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to connect with me. We can text, we can chat, we can email, whatever works for you, and you can always post a question in the general discussion forum. Hang in there. I know it's exciting. It might be a little intimidating. It's the first week of the term, but you totally got this. If you have any questions, let me know.